My name is Nick, and I consider myself quite an ordinary person in every sense of the word. Maybe I'm a little short and skinny, but overall I blend in with the crowd. All my life I have adhered to the motto, avoid arguments and be simple. My existence was quiet and peaceful, and exactly the way I liked it. Despite the lack of substantial income, I managed to make ends meet. My work, although not particularly interesting, gave me a sense of stability. I've had several relationships, but only one was really bright. Kelly became my wife, and with her I felt like someone special. Don't get me wrong, I was happy in my normal life, but Kelly made it unusual. I've never believed in the live and let live theory, not at all. But I have to admit that winning the tournament and getting a prize is great. That's how I felt when I married Kelly. Even after so many years of living together, she still makes me feel like a champion in a relationship. Well, almost all the time. Just because I prefer to avoid problems doesn't mean I'm a coward. At least, that's what I thought. Everyone else seemed to think I was compliant. Why do they have a different opinion of me? Of course, I may not be the most impressive person, but I've never had to resort to fighting in my entire life. I have always tried to live peacefully and not provoke problems, and no one has ever considered it necessary to challenge me. But I've always told myself that I won't back down if I ever find myself in a situation where I have to defend myself. Jack Knowles, another employee of my company, looked like a special snake that had made its way into my garden. While I was working in the climate control department, he was working in the receiving and shipping department. He was the exact opposite of me, tall, sturdy, handsome, and completely narcissistic. From the minimum that I managed to learn about him during our work together, it followed that in college he was fond of sports or something similar. And although the glory days were behind him, Jack tried to maintain both his physique and self-confidence. He liked to brag about his nickname in his former team, the Mountain. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you are the only one who sees someone's facade? It's like putting on special glasses from the movie Strangers Among Us, in which fools could be recognized from a mile away. In our team, both men and women seemed to be mesmerized by Jack's every word. His silly jokes cause laughter in the crowd, and the guys are happy to listen to him enthusiastically talking about his intimate adventures, not caring about caution. He flirts audaciously with all the beautiful office employees, regardless of their marital status. On top of that, he took long lunches and left work early without facing any consequences from management. I couldn't help but wonder how such smart people could be so fascinated by him. Some even called it the Mountain, which annoyed me, but I tried not to dwell on it. I was focused on my work and looking forward to returning home to my wife, Kelly. Jack and I never talked at work, so I kept my distance and kept quiet. I didn't want to cause problems, so I was puzzled when Jack suddenly started paying attention to me. Perhaps he felt that his usual tactics were not working on me. Anyway, I kept my composure and didn't get involved in the drama. I may have found myself in a typical situation where a bully and his next victim, but in this case, I was the target. It all started with small jokes, the kind that guys often make fun of my height and size. Sometimes when I needed to go down to the loading dock, he mockingly offered to help me get something on a high shelf. His friends were laughing, and I awkwardly played along with them, trying to brush off his insults. For some reason, Jack Knowles singled me out as a new target for workplace entertainment. Before I knew it, I was called Baby Nicky, a nickname from my childhood, which was now used to address me in the presence of colleagues and superiors. But no matter how hard he tried to belittle me, I didn't allow myself to do that. I felt a growing contempt for myself in the office, as if I instinctively realized that, judging by how everyone thinks of me, my chances of promotion are negligible. But I didn't care. The guy was just teasing. There was no need to escalate the situation. After analyzing the situation in hindsight, I realized that my usual approach actually worked against me, a habit that took root over time, which is not so easy to get rid of. I convinced myself that if I answered him, he would just laugh and shrug, saying it was all a joke. And if I escalate the situation, It is unlikely that it will entail any consequences for the golden boy. Most likely, I will simply distance myself from my colleagues and possibly lose my job. Knowles is just a ray of sunshine, always trying to cheer everyone up. Even if I was wrong, I never considered myself weak. I was sure that I had not yet reached the point where I needed to act. Looking back, I realized that I may have played a role in the unfolding events, creating the perfect conditions for everything to happen. All this had been going on for several months when Jack decided to make the situation worse. He brought me a bag of important papers from another office, noticing my name on it as he passed by. Instead of just leaving it in the mail cart, he personally delivered it to me. "Come on, Nikki, don't get bored. This is a special package," he said. He looked approvingly at the photo of my wife. "Not bad, little Nikki," he said with a grin. "I can't understand how you managed to keep her in line." When we were alone in the room, there was less humor in his tone and more sincere contempt. I couldn't help but smile back. After looking at his wife for too long, he casually threw the double frame on the bag and headed for the door. "Send her to me so that I can test her riding," he remarked. "A savage like her will definitely saddle you in the end. Consider it a favor." And he spat indifferently over his shoulder. For the first time in my life, I felt tension building inside me. But this feeling quickly dissipated, and my relationship with Jack remained serene. It was almost too calm, but I decided to trust my personal philosophy and believed that I could move forward again. After a while, the company held a traditional summer picnic. As I pulled into the parking lot, I saw Kelly checking herself in the mirror. At that moment, I fell in love with her all over again. As I sat there grateful for her presence, she caught my loving gaze. "What are you thinking about? Should I even know?" she asked. I just answered, "I think it's time for another vacation." "Really? Is that all?" she asked. "Yes," I said. Perhaps somewhere in the back of my mind I was remembering that day in my office. Imagining a warm and sunny beach, I suggested buying her a new bikini, or even going somewhere where she wouldn't need it. She playfully patted my hand and said, "Let's go." With that, she got out of the car, and I followed her example. My good mood quickly dissipated when Jack, the mountain man, arrived very late. Despite being late, he easily gathered a crowd around him. His charisma fascinated everyone present. While he entertained the group with his antics, I managed to keep Kelly and myself at a comfortable distance while we enjoyed a barbecue and a conversation. But I couldn't help but notice my wife glancing at a group of people nearby, clearly intrigued by what was happening. I felt that my luck was starting to run out. Jack, as expected, took a strategically advantageous position next to the drinks, and eventually we needed to restock. I hurriedly made my way to our drinks, back and forth, all the while noticing that Kelly was hesitant to leave the drinks area. I breathed a sigh of relief when he finally noticed me. "Hi, little Nikki," he called, stopping us in our tracks. "Does your mom know that you're secretly drinking beer?" Both our colleagues and unfamiliar guests burst out laughing at his not very funny joke. "Come on, it's not even good," I muttered as he came closer, emphasizing our obvious size difference. "I need to see the ID before I let you take this," he said. There was another round of laughter, but I barely paid attention to it. But this time my wife joined in the laughter. What used to seem like a wonderful, magical sound that I cherished so much now sounded like a beginner trying to learn how to play the clarinet. I couldn't help but look at her. I wasn't the only one who noticed that sound. Despite the fact that I was sure Jack admired the modest neckline of her summer dress more than I had up to that point, he pretended to be surprised by Kelly, as if seeing her for the first time. "Well, hello, and I know you. You're that amazing woman who looks good in swimsuits," he said, giving her a wry grin. "Excuse me?" she replied, and there was surprise in her tone, although there was not a drop of anger in her response. Moreover, there was a hint of a smile at the corners of her lips. My heart contracted with a sharp pain. Yes, Nicky likes to flaunt himself in front of guys. He likes to post photos that highlight your amazing figure, but honestly, this photo doesn't do you any good, Jack said. What? Are you serious? Exclaimed Kelly. There was anger in her voice, even though it wasn't directed at Jack. Her annoyance at his harmless fiber paled in comparison to what was going on inside me. I was not just annoyed, I was upset that she so readily accepted the words of a man she had never seen, especially when they contradicted everything I was trying to convey to her. Everyone present understood that if they were not sitting at my table, they could not see this photo. And yet no one condemned him for this stupidity. If I tried to deny it, I knew it would sound insincere and self-serving. I felt trapped, but my anger was directed primarily at Jack Knowles. My face was flushed with rage and insult. It turned so purple, as if I had been standing under the scorching sun for several hours. This fool couldn't count his fingers and toes without help. But at the same time, he easily controlled others, including my wife and, as a result, me. I was still wearing my glasses. How is it that only I see him as he really is? He was staring at Kelly intently, and there was nothing sophisticated about it. His body language said that I didn't exist, but his words were directed at both of us. I'd love to take you out somewhere if you ever get rid of babysitting duties, Jack Kelly said. There was laughter again, although this time it was more jerky and awkward. At least my colleagues had some sense of decency. My wife screamed in surprise, covering her mouth with her hand, but a sly grin played on her cheeks, and her eyes shone with pleasure. I've seen this before. Damn women. They never turn down the opportunity to claim their superior intuition, insisting that they fully understand men. But this obvious insight evaporates when it is most needed. Jack was dressed like a used car salesman, and he reeked of insincerity. At that moment, I felt completely defeated and hopeless. I clearly lacked support, especially in the area where I needed it most. Suddenly, the desire to drink, eat, or have fun disappeared, and I decided to leave the pub. When I started to leave, I took Kelly's hand. She hesitated for a moment, as if she didn't know what to do, but then something clicked and she followed me. Perhaps she was just stunned by my sudden decision, but I couldn't help but regard her indecision as a small betrayal. I let go of her hand as if it was too hot to hold before she could move. I purposefully walked away, vaguely aware that Kelly, as usual, was making excuses to the crowd and then following her. Jack, without hesitation, exclaimed, "Hey, come on, Nikki. I was just joking. Don't be a jerk. You know I would never want to cross you." His words provoked another fit of laughter, including from Kelly, which she did not have time to stop. She just couldn't help but laugh. For a moment, I thought Jack might wonder if he'd gone too far. But no, he couldn't do that kind of introspection. Even if he felt it, his pride would have forced him to hold a gun so as not to lose face. I left and sat down on a picnic bench, lost in thought. Kelly stood slightly behind me, watching the emotions reflected on my face. I could feel a whole whirlwind of feelings swirling in her, indignation at me, embarrassment not because of me, but because of my situation, and confusion about what exactly she should tell me. Maybe even a feeling of annoyance, condemnation, or neglect. How did he manage to humiliate me so cleverly and completely in front of my own wife? And why didn't she notice it? Finally, she broke the silence. "Was this demonstration really necessary?" she asked me. I stared at her in disbelief. "Your friend has put you in a difficult position. Of course he was rude, but he was just joking. That was clear. Maybe he does it all the time," she continued. I gradually stood up and met her gaze. "My friend?" I asked. "Forget about it, I have no idea," she replied. She decided to change her approach. "If you don't approve of other guys flirting with your wife, then maybe you should think about stopping showing her off to your colleagues," Kelly said. I felt a wave of disappointment wash over me, and I lowered my head slightly, shaking it several times. Kelly completely misinterpreted my body language. "Why don't we solve this problem?" she suggested, gesturing back to where we came from. "I'm sure we can all come together, apologize to each other, and admit that it was just a misunderstanding." I thought for a second before replying, "No thanks. I understood everything perfectly, and my day is already ruined." I turned around and walked back to the car, realizing that I had gone on this journey alone. Looking around, I found her at a table with drinks in the distance. For a moment, I thought about my next actions, my vision blurred with anger. I climbed into the car and started the engine to turn on the air conditioner. Sitting in the cabin and cooling the air, I focused on the details of the manufacturer's logo on the steering wheel, although my disappointment remained as strong as before. In the end, I decided to fuck it all and put the car in reverse. Just as I was about to drive off, there was a knock on the passenger window. It was Kelly, gesturing in disbelief. I stopped, unlocked the doors, and she climbed in, clearly unhappy. "What's the matter?" she asked. "I was just leaving to offer our apologies, and Mr. Knowles was kind enough to do the same," she said. I exclaimed, "Apologize? For what? This guy is a worldwide jerk." "There were a lot of moments today, but in the end nothing unusual happened," she replied. "Wait a minute, Mr. Knowles," I interrupted her. Kelly was taken aback for a moment. I never communicate like that. That should have alerted her, but she brushed the thought aside as her brief encounter with him revealed something else. At the mention of the name of a new acquaintance, a slight blush appeared on her cheeks. Subconsciously trying to control herself, she felt angry again. "Fantastic! I was trying to do everything right and you decided to attack me. I can't believe you're acting like this. I never imagined that you could behave so immaturely. So I really have to take care of you, don't I?" exclaimed Kelly. I can't imagine what expression was on my face, but whatever it was, it seemed to completely upset her. She turned away without a single word of apology, convinced that I should apologize. The ride home was filled with awkward silence. Of course, I was lost in my own thoughts, assuming that she was too. But the only time I dared to look in her direction, I saw her reflection in the window. There was a faint smile on her lips. Was she lost in thought? We didn't exchange a single word that evening, and after that there was a sense of distance between us. We returned to our usual routine of casual conversations and everyday topics, and there was not the slightest hint of intimacy between us. I couldn't help but feel melancholy about how quickly our bond had faded. After that memorable picnic, my bad mood returned to normal, although it did not completely disappear. As much as I felt unworthy of having Jake Knowles in my life, it hurt me even more to see my partner take his side. The day after the picnic, Jack tried to publicly force me to apologize, but I still didn't say anything. I barely noticed the subtle sarcasm in his gesture, but now it was different. I was no longer carefree. I protected myself from everyone. For the first time, I decided not to go with the flow. Now I was seething with indignation. His comment was added to this, and I found myself going through a crisis of faith. My usual defense mechanism, which had served me well for years, seemed to be crumbling. It was hard for me to resist this realization, which was quite logical given the circumstances. The more I thought about my wife, the more bitter the taste in my mouth became. Usually after a few days a man comes to his senses and apologizes, but I felt that I had nothing to apologize for, and getting Kelly to forgive seemed like an impossible task. To be honest, I wasn't even interested in getting an apology from her. I realized that I didn't give a damn about her at all. I began to look at her every step from a new angle. Has she always had these annoying little habits? Did I just ignore them before? Did I suppress my petty irritations out of love? To be honest, among the new problems that appeared, there were several minor irritations, something that I always knew, but now I felt more acutely. I realized that her musical taste was truly terrible. Her car was a disaster. There were at least 10 empty coffee cups in the passenger seat. Why do I feel like I'm only noticing this now? And why did it suddenly bother me? But I think all this is just a reflection of how she treats me. I think she thinks she's hiding it well. And yet, for the first time, I really noticed her. I noticed subtle expressions that betrayed her dislike of my habits. I could feel her contempt, even a hint of pity. To be honest, apologizing when I didn't do anything wrong would probably only make the situation worse. We drifted apart without even having a fight. It's weird, but I'm not sure it bothers me that much. This thought tormented me even more than the fear of losing her. Before all this happened, I would have said with confidence that Kelly was beyond my reach and that I would never find anyone as incredible as her again. But now, looking at this amazing woman, I could only think of betrayal. Weeks have passed, and calm has been established in the workplace. I didn't hear a sound from Jack, but I noticed his sly grin when he thought I wasn't paying attention. My attention was completely turned to work. No one approached me in the office unless it was exclusively about work. I felt their concern and felt their pitying gazes on me. My dislike for them began to grow. My boss assigned me difficult tasks, thinking that he was doing it delicately. At first, I brushed off these rumors caused by my humiliation at the picnic, but soon realized that this was just the beginning. There was much more behind those hidden glances than I could have imagined. The last blow to my former life was dealt in the men's room in the main lobby of the company. I didn't usually use this toilet, but then I became so withdrawn, bitter and angry at everything. Sitting at the table and looking at the cooked dinner, I felt disappointment growing inside me. That's enough, I decided. It's time to please yourself. I haven't allowed myself any indulgences for a long time. If Jack could enjoy long lunches, then why can't I? With that thought in mind, I threw my lunch in the trash and headed for the exit, mentally heading to the elite steakhouse in the city center. Before going out, I decided to take a short toilet break. Even though I only needed to urinate, my mood took me to the last stall. Just when I finished and reached for the flush, two guys came up to the urinals nearby. They were not particularly quiet, clearly not noticing that there was someone else nearby. I recognized their voices, but I couldn't distinguish between Mike and Gavin. Both worked with Knowles on loading and were part of the team of movers. "Hey, are you sure you want wings?" one of them asked. "We still have time to buy a steak," replied the guy I thought was Gavin. It was obvious that we were on the same wavelength. "But this is only after the salary. My wife will kill me if I spend the money now," Mike said. Gavin let out a short laugh. Mike felt the need to explain himself. "Hey, we can't all be like Jack. I'm shocked that he's actually dating Nikki's wife." "What did he say?" "Do you really think so?" asked Gavin. "Isn't that a bit presumptuous, even for him?" "Oh, definitely," Gavin confirmed. "After the barbecue, he practically knocked her down. He mentioned that he was going to meet her next week. They had lunch plans, and I can't help but think that he might be lying in her bed right now while we're talking." "Do you think little Nikki knows about this?" asked Mike. "Who knows, dude? And honestly, what's the difference? What can he do about it?" his friend replied. They both laughed, a little embarrassed. At least these guys washed their hands, even if it meant I had to stand in the last stall for an extra 30 seconds. They didn't even notice me. At that moment, I realized that you can be shocked, but not surprised. Unlike the guy who had just left, I had no doubt that his words were true. A lot of things fell into place, but that didn't change the fact that what I heard out loud hit me like a ton of bricks. The opinion of my colleagues became obvious to me. I performed the usual actions on autopilot, almost not noticing my reflection when I splashed water on my face. The only thing I was thinking about was the complete lack of appetite. When I left the parking lot, I did not plan to go to the city center. All my doubts disappeared as soon as I pulled up to the house and noticed Kelly's car parked at the entrance, and an SUV that I assumed belonged to Knowles. They didn't even bother to hide it. The neighbors are just as aware of what is happening as my colleagues. It's still strange for me to think about all this. I should be complaining. Perhaps this is how it should be, but the deep blue color of mental pain completely obscured the fiery red color of betrayal. Anger boiled in my stomach like a hot coal. When I got to the front door, I realized that I wasn't afraid of Jack the Mountain at all. At that moment, All my thoughts were consumed with a thirst for revenge. I've heard the expression red veil before. Now I am fully aware of this expression. It was as if a red lens of rage had been placed on my perception. I could hear them through the door, but as soon as I opened it, the unmistakable sounds of rough copulation filled the air. A short walk on the carpet confirmed the harsh reality of my marriage. They were both completely naked. From my position at the door and from our bed, I was mostly behind them, but at the right angle to see their outlines. I've seen enough. He turned and slid to the wall next to the doorway, out of my line of sight. It wasn't that I needed to hide. I was still seething, but strangely enough, watching what was happening firsthand calmed me down a little. I wasn't going to confront them. I needed to think about my actions. A part of my former self has surfaced deep inside me. Wait, it won't end well. There's nothing you can do to make it worse. Just come back and have lunch. Pretend you didn't see anything, I thought. But just as quickly as the new self appeared, the old self plunged me back into darkness. You've been avoiding this your whole life. Look at the results it has led to. You're just an unhappy guy with an unfaithful wife, no matter how you justify it. I kept thinking. I looked into the bedroom for a moment. My gaze settled on the back of Jack's head. Of course, I was furious with my wife, but this jerk is the one who started it all. Kelly decided to betray me on her own, but he's been striving for it ever since he saw her picture. He convinced himself that this was something he could do without consequences. I knew I had to answer in a way that would make him regret his arrogance for the rest of his life. Despite my anger, I wasn't a fool. If I had confronted him directly, he would most likely have overpowered me, and my so-called wife might have found humor in all this. She could even tell the police that I attacked him. Even if I had hit him first, I would have regretted it almost immediately. I thought that having a weapon could make a difference, a baseball bat or a crowbar that I had in my garage. A good punch can leave a mark, but it's likely to go away quickly. But how hard can I hit him? No wonder he got the nickname the Mountain. Maybe I could hit him on the head. But what if I just end up killing him? I will not pretend that the thought of murder did not occur to me at that moment, regardless of the consequences. And yet, deep down, I knew that I didn't want Jack Knowles to die that day. I really wanted him to feel the full weight of his actions and regret for a long time that he humiliated me. At that moment, it dawned on me. It wasn't just me, it was him. Jack Knowles had significant debts on his karmic balance sheet. But today is the day of reckoning. Today he will face the consequences of his actions and repent of them. I felt that my desire for revenge was not only justified, but also that I was a vessel of justice. I had to restore the balance in the universe. What should I do next? I found myself in the minority when I was faced with a situation where I was physically bypassed. There was only one way out: to defeat your opponent. He was the kind of person who could always find a job, even if it meant becoming a fence post if his current job failed. But what did it matter to me? He liked meeting my wife. What could I do? No, I couldn't physically confront him, and using my intellect at that moment seemed pointless. Instead, I realized that I had to push him to the brink of insanity. All my life I've been strategizing, and my wife and Jack have used this skill to betray me behind my back. The time has come for decisive action. It's amazing how long I've been thinking about this, while the man I despised the most was reveling in the company of the woman I once loved, right in his bed. My mind was racing, thoughts racing through my head in the blink of an eye. It took much longer to express all this than it took to create the ideas themselves. I went downstairs quietly. I didn't need to be too quiet, but I didn't want to be discovered. I snuck into the garage and took out an almost full can of WD-40 from the closet above the small, built-in workbench. After that, I returned to the house, got to the decorative fireplace where Kelly kept scented candles, and took the lighter lying there. When I was ready, I slipped back into the bedroom. I cautiously approached Jack, and luck finally leaned on my side. Jack looked like a tough, macho, hairy guy who clearly didn't take care of himself. It was a bonus for me. Just as I was about to take a step, his grumbling became much louder and more frantic. Perfect. I couldn't help but giggle. I must be being watched by the higher powers who delivered my sworn enemy right into my hands. I was going to not only ruin Mr. Knowles's day, but also change the course of his life. Jack might have assumed that one day I would be able to catch him, and maybe even welcomed the idea, but he never thought that I would be able to beat him. I realized that he thought I was going to cry or scream in shock. Perhaps he even expected me to start resisting and give him a chance to strike back. But there was no mistaking the hissing behind him, the feeling of sliding down his back, and the sudden, overpowering smell of every man's favorite lubricant outside the bedroom. At that moment, everything was so alien that his mind could barely handle it. He was on the verge of losing consciousness. "What the hell?" was the only thing he said, and turned around to feel the oil covering his hairy back while the front part remained untouched. He instinctively closed his eyes as a thin mist fell on his face, and it kind of worked. But not before he saw me. And what a bonus it was. Seriously, didn't he even take care of himself in this place? I hoped he'd have the sense to figure out what was going on, and maybe even brush off the joke. No one can be that reckless, can they? I flicked the lighter, bringing the flame closer to the spray. The result was so unexpected that it took me by surprise. The fog ignited, turning into a jet of fire. A moment later, the nickname Mountain could be called Human Torch. Then a scream followed. I couldn't tell if Jack had any boxing experience, but his fast-moving punches were easy to dodge. It looks like his main goal was to knock the jar out of my hands. After that, he took a few awkward steps towards me, waving his arms. His size played against him, and I dodged his punch. We switched places in the bedroom, and I launched my own attack. I took a quick look at Kelly to make sure she wasn't involved. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, curled up in a ball, her eyes wide with shock and horror. The instinct of desire in her disappeared, replaced by a more primitive desire to escape from the flames. I couldn't help feeling that her fantasies about how this confrontation might go are being destroyed as the harsh truth becomes apparent, and it is difficult for her to accept the reality that has opened up before her. Jack was in a state of panic, moving erratically towards our dresser, shouting incoherently and waving his arms. I was briefly worried that the room might catch fire, but as long as he kept moving, there was nothing flammable nearby. To be honest, I didn't care. It was almost comical to watch the fiery figure lose his composure. I knew that my thoughts were not entirely clear. I had just caught my wife in bed with another man, but Jack was really not himself. After all, he was literally on fire. At that moment, a thought occurred to me. If this were a movie, the main character would have already prepared a clever line. Finally, for the first time since it all started, I felt compelled to speak out. "Hey, Jackie, light it up. Let's go." I know it could have been more creative, but it was just a reaction of the moment. Most importantly, I wanted my words to make an indelible impression on him, to be forever imprinted in his memory. And finally, a spark of awareness flashed through his brain, and he collapsed to the ground, writhing. A little safety advice. If you suddenly find yourself on fire, the best course of action is to stop, fall, and roll over. But this advice is canceled if you were deliberately set on fire by someone you underestimated because you behaved like a complete jerk. When this person is right above you and tirelessly pours flames at you, the usual reaction will not save you. Eventually, I stopped my frantic movements when I noticed that the carpet was on fire. His skating could put out the flames, but only if I stopped giving him an impromptu Viking funeral. When the flame turned to smoke, a sharp, unpleasant smell appeared in the air. His desperate screams turned into pitiful moans of suffering. Then I noticed that maniacal laughter was being heard around, and only then did I realize that it was coming from my own mouth. At that moment, something changed. I stood there, free from anger, devoid of the pain of betrayal. At that moment, I felt only exultation, the sweet taste of victory over my opponent. I suddenly felt sympathy for the primitive man who broke the skull of a rival, or for the Ronin samurai who drove his blade into the heart of the monster who killed his sensei. I quickly looked around my bedroom to make sure there was no danger of fire. Then I looked back at Kelly. She turned abruptly pale under my gaze, and fear was reflected on her face, as if she was afraid that she might become the next one. But I wasn't going to hurt her. As I turned to leave, it seemed to me that there was a flicker of remorse in her eyes, as if the weight of the last few weeks had finally been lifted. But now it was too late. As I approached the front door, the alarm went off. I went out on the porch, casually threw the WD-40 and the lighter into the yard, and then settled into an armchair. While I was sitting, I was overwhelmed by a whirlpool of thoughts and emotions. I admit, I was filled with fear and uncertainty about my future, but I didn't regret anything. I took out my phone and clicked on the Facebook button for some reason. I rarely use it and usually don't get many friend requests or notifications. I only went there because I understood. The news will spread, and I wanted to tell you about myself. I changed my privacy settings from friends only to public and started writing. When others receive information about what happened, I want them to understand me. I won't make excuses or complain. All I can say is that the man thought he was a tough guy, and as it turned out, he was right. That's all. I hit the share button and threw the phone on the table. I got comfortable and waited, feeling that the day was a success. It seemed like an eternity before I finally heard the approaching wail of a siren. How long will it take my wife to figure out what happened after her lover came out of the oven? I didn't know yet that I was going to spend a lot more time just sitting and waiting. When the police arrived, I did not resist, but only briefly confirmed that I was complying with the conditions while I was being arrested and processed. I was silent during the interrogation. I knew perfectly well that I didn't need to speak, and there was no need. There was no doubt about what had happened. It never occurred to me to use the services of a lawyer, so I was stunned when a few days later one of them appeared in the interrogation room. A guy dressed in an expensive suit that probably cost more than my car listened to my explanation that I didn't need legal representation, and if I did, I couldn't afford it. I assumed that Kelly had already cleaned out our bank account and was preparing for a civil lawsuit. To my surprise, he said that I wouldn't have to pay for anything. His firm offered to represent me in exchange for part of the lawsuit I was going to file. "Wait, am I filing a lawsuit?" I said. This was unexpected news. Of course, the incident in my house would have been known sooner or later, especially at work, but I could not imagine how sensational it would turn out to be. And then there's my obscure Facebook post, which somehow went viral. I got my brief moment of fame sitting in a prison cell, isolated from the outside world and completely unaware of what was going on. At work, everyone seemed to adore Jack Knowles, but it quickly turned out that they liked gossip even more. Rumors spread like wildfire, causing an influx of reporters, not from major publications, but local journalists eager to learn a sensational story. The same people who once praised Knowles are now willingly turning against him. To be honest, they probably exaggerated the situation a lot more than I actually went through, but it didn't bother me. Before the company could react, there were high-profile stories about a toxic work environment rife with harassment and insults. The public began to treat me as a long-suffering victim, and the company as an accomplice. It was only a matter of time before I reached my limit. My lawyer and his firm were far from disinterested. They were like sharks scenting an opportunity. To be honest, I didn't have much of an argument. But this lawyer was an experienced professional. He had a large firm behind him, and my firm was drowning in negative advertising. He was confident that we would be able to conclude a profitable agreement without any problems. In exchange for my cooperation, they will take over both my lawsuit and my case. It all seemed simple to me. It was probably one of the easiest cases the police had ever encountered. Nevertheless, my new lawyer assured me that he has sufficient skills to significantly mitigate the consequences. I had an impeccable track record and a lot of very favorable public circumstances that could have worked in my favor. All I asked in return was for someone to take care of my divorce just to help me get through it. I was facing a prison sentence, and it seemed useless to fight for anything else. When my lawyer asked if I wanted to prepare the divorce papers, I was caught off guard. It's been 2 weeks now, and I haven't even thought about bail. I just assumed that Kelly had already filed for divorce and that the paperwork would come any day. But my lawyer informed me that according to his information, she did not do this. It was weird. As a result, I was sentenced to 7 years with the possibility of parole in 5. The final amount of the settlement agreement with my former employer is unknown to me. The law firm that handled my case most likely hid this information from me, not wanting me to know how much they pocketed. There will be no pension with my share, but I will have a chance to start life from scratch when I am free again. Yes, I was a little annoyed when Jack decided to sue me, but my fortune can hardly be called rich. You can't squeeze money out of a stone. With what I had, he couldn't have bought yachts. To be honest, there probably won't be enough money in the world to make up for how badly things turned out. On top of that, I was trapped. I couldn't access my funds because the settlement was tied to a separate account that was closed. So, Kelly had to deal with the consequences. He certainly wasn't acting cool anymore, was he? No. She sacrificed her marriage and her usual lifestyle for the sake of a man who, in fact, became a very expensive gigolo. It's all the stranger that she never filed for divorce, although, considering that we were still married at the time of that incident, I doubt that she would have been able to protect her property from him in this way. But in the end, none of that mattered. It was all behind high walls that separated me from it all. As far as I know, I'm divorced. I've been here for a year now, and during that time I haven't met her, heard from her, or tried to contact her. I suppose I'll have to meet her eventually, but maybe I won't. 5 to 7 years is quite a long time. To fill my time, I took up reading and weightlifting. There was nothing else to do, and when I got out of prison, I couldn't just lash out at those who disagreed with me. I might not have the potential to be outstanding, but I was determined to make the most of my position. Maybe I should consider getting a tattoo or two to commemorate my time in prison. And then, as luck would have it, I received a letter from a strange, lonely woman. I have heard more than once about these unusual women who form romantic relationships with prisoners through letters. I have repeatedly received declarations of eternal love and fidelity from women whom I have never even seen. At first I was skeptical. It all seemed too strange, but I couldn't help but find something interesting in it. Here's my story. Hardly anyone was really happy except my lawyer, but I believe that I managed to get out of this difficult situation as well as possible. I am calm for my life. My prison term is almost over, and Jack is stuck in his miserable existence, trapped in a skin he can't get out of. The only thing that remains is that I still have to give myself a chance at freedom. And that's the end of the story. Thank you for your valuable time. Give me your generous likes. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. May the force be with you.